Hello again everybody, back with another video. This one I've called Spin Spin Spin, and it's looking at a government briefing on the coronavirus that was put out on the 26th of January 2021, and in it Chris Whitty glossed over some figures and claimed basically they weren't that important and focused on deaths. Death seems to be what they want to focus on, but let's take a look and I'll show you what I mean by spin, spin, spin. So this is the creature that put the data forward, and if you ask me, it always looks like a frightened rabbit in car headlamps before it gets squashed. Not very confident whether or not he's uncomfortable with what he's presenting or he's just uncomfortable, full stop. But this was from the 26th of January, and I'll play a clip in a minute. But what he actually put forward, and bear in mind this guy's meant to be a top scientist, he put this graph up here. So he was talking about these are number of people. Notice they always say number of people testing positive for COVID-19. They don't call them people with, they say tested positive for. And there's a big difference between a positive test and somebody who allegedly has this so-called disease, which I believe is completely made up and fake, and it's just replaced seasonal illness that we get every year. But he said basically they are declining, and he showed this graph here. And basically, he said the ONS data suggests it's not quite as steep as this, and these are the number of cases rapidly dropping off the cliff, which is not good news. And I don't kind of understand, if they're in full control of this data, how this has happened, or maybe it's just there for people like me to annoy me, I don't know. But he made some assumptions, and let's go through what he said.
The best and most important thing we can all do to honour the memory of those who have died is to work together with ever greater resolve to defeat this disease, and that is what we will do. I'm now going to hand over to Chris for the slides.
Thank you, Prime Minister. On this very sad day, I've just got three slides. The first is the number of people testing positive for COVID in the UK. And as you can see on this graph, the number peaked at an extremely high number. It is still at a very high number, but it has been coming down.
There you heard the language. It peaked at an extremely high, and it's still a high number. So really pushing the height of the number rather than the decline.
I want to just put one caution on that, which is that Office for National Statistics data demonstrates a rather slower decrease, and I think we need to be careful that we do not relax too early.
So the ONS data is going to be less of a drop, is it? So you sure these figures aren't going to stay set in stone? Are you going to come back and show us what the ONS data means? I don't think so. I believe he's just thrown that in to play down that significant drop that you can see. So he quickly glossed over that very important data which should have had them jumping up and down with joy and telling everybody just to bear with it for a few more weeks. But he didn't. He went on to hospitals, number of beds taken, and deaths. But let's have a look at those figures and apply some science to them and see what they mean. What I've done is I've tried to do something called normalisation of data. And what that means in the scientific field is you present the data of a proportion. So if you do 10 tests and get 5 failures, you've got a 50% failure. And if you do 8 tests and you get 4 failures, you've got a 50% failure. So you have to relate the figures you see into how many tests are done. So there is a government website, as you can see here, is the reference. And you can get this graph showing the virus tests conducted in blue, and this line is the 7-day average. And you can put the cursor on any of these and it will come up with the number, or you can look at the data, so select this, and you can have the list of data here. So here's the daily tests conducted, and they've got some cumulative tests here for some reason, but this is the figure that I've taken. So the other source of data, we need to get the number of tests, and we need to get this from a reputable source. So here, this one is Worldometer, and these are the official figures that the government basically project out to the world. And this site is using these figures, and these are the figures you see quoted on our briefings. So these are not, figures to be ignored. They're the figures they've been using all along to push this crummy agenda. So as you can see, you can get a graph, you can put the cursor on it and read it, or you can go through the date. So you've got a number of new cases. These are positive tests, not cases. And here's the deaths. So you've got that data. So what I've done is I've created a spreadsheet, and I collect the number of daily cases. And in this case, I've taken the 29th of December through to the 26th of January. At the time of making this is the only figure I have. So these are the death figures, but these are the total tests that I've got from that previous website. So from this, if we divide the cases per total tests, we get the number of positive cases per test. Now that will be a very small number, but if we multiply by 1,000, we get the number of positive results per 1,000. So if we've got 53135 daily cases and we've got 344775 total tests, we divide this one by this, multiply by 100, and this gives us the positive tests per 100. So here we go, look, so it starts at 154 and ends on the 26th at 34 per 1,000. So you can see a significant drop. Now if we put that on a graph, this is not looking at the normalised data, this is looking at the total cases. So these are the total positive tests that I've taken from Worldometer. As you can see, it shows an increase. This was the tier 4 for 75% of England's population in response to this magical 56% more transmittable virus, this variant we've got. And this was the lockdown, and you can see they've fallen right off, just like Chris Whitty's graph. Now, but let's have a look at the normalised data. So here, these are daily positive tests per 1,000 virus tests from the 29th of December 2020 to the 26th of January 2021. Now, just going back, this data point here has gone up a little, but this is the one that I haven't got the data for at the moment in terms of number of tests. But if we plot this, we can see that we have a straight line relationship, and we've got a fall. We've got a fall from about 138 down to something like 48. So we've had 90 cases per 1,000 drop. Now that is pretty significant. Here's the source again for the Worldometer for positive tests, and the government website for the number of tests. So you can find all that information there. And so you can test all this data. It's all there. It's all true YouTube. So as we can see, the tier 4 lockdown, tier 5, it was actually already on its way down. Now, as I said, I am not trying to reinforce their data. I am using their data and show what a proper scientific analysis should be like. This is normalised because it's ratioed to the number of tests, and it clearly shows a fall. Now, if Chris Whitty was a scientist, this is what they would be doing with the data. Now, let's take this data. As you can see, it's falling. Let's extend this date until we get down to 0. So here we go. So I've projected this. Now, if this was a scientist and you were looking at a trend, and you're looking at this, forget these things, nonsense blooming lockdowns, and look at this here. By the 10th of February 2021, we'll be at 0. Now, of course, they're going to come up with something that gets this back up. But I'm just saying, looking at the data, if he was a true scientist and he really was concerned about this virus, they should be presenting this data and they should be jumping up and down. But they're not. And I'll sum that up in a minute. So, the options for what Chris Whitty really is are He's a completely incompetent, useless scientist. He's not a scientist at all, but a spin doctor, presenter, actor or puppet. Or he's a real scientist, but deliberately spinning a tale of deceit. Now, I don't think he's a completely incompetent, useless scientist. He's more likely to be one of the two here. Somewhere probably in between. Could even be not a scientist at all, but just a spin doctor. But as I said, if this data is real, the pandemic is real, and these clowns were genuine. They were genuinely carrying out this role. He was a genuine PM, having rule over the government and everything else. In the real world, these people should be presenting normalised data, just like I've done. And they should be jumping up and joy at the news and telling people they've just got a few more weeks of the lockdown and it'll have all gone away. But no, they didn't. No, they glossed over and they span the data to get back onto deaths. And now they're talking about extending the lockdown. It's never going to go, people. This lockdown is here to stay, or versions of it. They're going to erode people's will, attack their soul. They're going to make them accept everything until all the freedom, all their belongings, the cars have gone. And now what they're doing, because of this so-called, and bear in mind, let's go back. We have supposedly have this very infectious variant in the UK. But look at this. Wouldn't that be going the other way if you listen to all the news? So clearly they're just spinning the data. Even their own data you can rip apart. But they aren't normalising data, so what does that tell you? What it tells me is they're just a bunch of presenters, actors, you could say announcers. They're just there to push this virus agenda, to strip away your rights, your properties, your freedom of travel, everything. That's my view. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and goodbye.